we have new vehicle data regarding pricing, incentives, and inventory. And while things are absolutely improving in a number of different categories, there is one thing that is also absolutely true, and that is dealerships have inventory piling up. But before we dive into that, let's first talk about interest rates. Just this week, the Federal Reserve cut rates for the third time this year, with the most recent cut being a cut of 25 basis points. The Fed benchmark rate now currently sits at 4.6%, down from 5.33%, which it was at previously. Now, in the context of car loans and car affordability, while the lowering of rates by the Federal Reserve is no doubt a good thing, but you also shouldn't expect for car loan interest rates or mortgage interest rates to come crashing down as a result. Because the impact that interest rate cuts will have on loans like car loans, it'll take some time for us to see that impact on a consumer level. The average rate of new car loans was 6.8% in November, according to Edmunds, down from 7.4% in the same time of 2023 and up from 6.6% in 2022. Rates for the average used car were higher, with the average used car rate sitting at 11% in November, slightly lower than the 11.6% seen in November of 2023, but higher than what we saw in November of 2022, where it was at 10.2%. Now, I've talked about this dozens of times on my channel before, but I think it's important to reiterate it here in this video that places like credit unions are absolutely your friend in economic scenarios like what we're seeing today, where interest rates are still high on things like car loans. My husband and I are currently getting financing for another car to add to our Turo fleet, since we just recently paid off the financing on our 2018 Lincoln Navigator that we purchased last year, and we were just approved for a 5.4% 72-month car loan, though we will most likely end up getting a lower rate because we'll only be financing it for about 48 months and paying it off much quicker than that. But not only is 5.4% significantly lower than the average rate for a used car, but it is also almost a percentage point lower than the interest rate that we got last year on our Lincoln Navigator. And while the car that we're buying today isn't a Lincoln Navigator, virtually every other component of the loan are the exact same: credit score, loan term, amount borrowed. And when I borrowed money last year to buy the Navigator, I was approved for about 6.4%, which at the time was significantly better than the average as well. And so while the average interest rate car market wide is still very, very high, you can get a much better, much more acceptable rate from avenues like credit unions. And even though it feels as though the car market hasn't improved as much as maybe we would have hoped it would have, we are seeing improvements in these rates, which is a great sign. Now, according to Cox Automotive, the average listing price for a new vehicle is currently $48,978, which is up 1.8% from a month earlier and is 2.8% higher compared to this time last year. The total amount of inventory that the car market currently has is 3.15 million units. You guys may remember that with my last report that I did on this topic, which was in November, it was the first time that the car market had hit 3 million units of inventory, and now we have surpassed that, which is an indicator that from an inventory perspective, the car market absolutely has returned to pre-pandemic levels. This currently equates to an 85-day supply, and the average listing price for a vehicle is $48,978. You can see here that whenever it comes to low inventory automakers, there is more of the same. Lexus, Toyota, Honda, those are the automakers that have the lowest amounts of inventory, with Honda seeing quite a large growth over the last few months with now 62 days of inventory, but Lexus and Toyota trailing quite a ways behind with 31 and 36 days of inventory. And while there are only a handful of automakers that have below average days supply of inventory, there are quite a lot that have above average day supply, with some of the largest inventory automakers coming from brands like Jaguar and Lincoln, which both have over 170-day supply, while automakers like Infiniti, Mercedes, Hyundai, Cadillac, Nissan, Dodge, Audi, Ford, Buick, Ram, Jeep, and many all having over 100 days of inventory. Some of these names have been staples when it comes to high inventory automakers. For example, Lincoln, Jaguar, Stellantis brands. These are all automakers that have seen inventory piling up on dealership lots for the better part of 2024, and it looks as though they aren't going to end the year any different. But what this does tell us is that with these automakers specifically, you can absolutely get some huge discounts. And we are seeing this play out on websites like cars.com, AutoTrader, calling into the dealership directly, there are absolutely more incentives being put out on these cars, especially the ones with high inventory levels. But that isn't to say that you can't get a discount with these lower inventory cars, because believe it or not, even brands like Lexus and Toyota are giving out discounts. So what I'm saying is that whether you're wanting to buy a car from a low inventory automaker or a high inventory automaker, it's not a question of if you can get a discount, it is just a matter of how much of a discount you can get. Now, on the topic of affordability and discounts, let's talk about dealership incentives. Now, I mentioned earlier that the average vehicle listing price was $48,978, which was not only up year over year, but it was also up month over month. The average vehicle transaction price, on the other hand, was $48,724, which is an increase of $699 or 1.5% from the year prior. Now, if you look at the graph of average vehicle transaction price, you can see that this figure has been relatively flat for the better part of the last year and a half. This figure absolutely skyrocketed in May, June, and July of 2021, and then continued to trickle upwards until about January of 2023, where it began to flatline. And while there have been some fluctuations in this figure over the last year or so, we are pretty much flat, give or take a few $100. This is obviously not great, and it is extremely frustrating given the fact that inventory is absolutely at pre-pandemic levels, and yet average vehicle transaction price isn't. And this is something that I talked about frequently on my channel because it is so important to drive this point home, is that at this point with the car market, high car prices, it has nothing to do with supply and demand. It has everything to do with the fact that dealerships are less inclined to negotiate today than they were pre-pandemic, even though things have improved since 2021. It also has to do with the fact that automakers have gotten rid of cheap vehicles, they are doubling down on expensive ones, and as a result, it is driving this transaction price and average listing price up. This has absolutely nothing to do with supply and demand. The huge silver lining here, and something that I really think is an important positive figure to the current state of the car market, is the average incentive. Now, you can see here a graph from 2012 until 2024, and you can see that while for a very, very long time, the average percentage of incentives was about 10%. And this absolutely tanked in 2021 and 2022, where the average incentive was about 2% of average vehicle transaction price. This has been steadily creeping up over the last year and a half, 2 years, and now it sits at 8%, which is only about 2 to 2.5% less than what we saw pre-pandemic. We absolutely want to see that improvement and we want to see those pre-pandemic levels, but the fact that the average incentive is climbing, it is improving in favor of the consumer, that is absolutely great news. Now, according to this report from Cox Automotive, and truthfully, I've been seeing the same thing as I've been looking for cars and as I've been doing market research, it's the fact that incentives wildly, vastly, depending on what type of automaker you're looking at. If you're looking at an automaker that has a lot of inventory, you are no doubt going to have much more attractive incentives compared to automakers with lower levels of inventory. You also have to look at the inventory spread. So what amount of their inventory is 2024 versus 2025 models? In some cases, even some automakers have 2023 models that are still new. This is absolutely also going to have an impact on the type of incentive that you receive. But the bottom line is incentives are improving. You are getting more discounts on cars, and this is a great thing. Now, whenever it comes to this data from the new car market, I'm truthfully a little conflicted about it, because on one hand, I am happy that there are components of the car market that are returning to normal. I'm happy that inventory has improved dramatically. You now can buy the car that you want to buy. You don't necessarily have to go on a wait list. You don't have to settle, and dealerships aren't able to use the excuse of inventory as a way to charge more. But on the other hand, I am frustrated with the fact that despite the fact that inventory has returned to pre-pandemic levels, prices just haven't. And I think that what we've seen over the last 3 to 6 months really solidifies the idea that unless something drastic happens, like a very large recession, the car market just isn't going to change much from what it is today. And I think, unfortunately, for car buyers, especially new car buyers, well, they just have to come to terms with the fact that they're going to be paying significantly more for a new car today than they would have paid 4 or 5 years ago. There you guys have it, though. That is the new car market update. Remember that we are officially in the end of year, end of quarter, end of month. So if you are someone who is looking to buy a car, now is a great time to do it. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but I'm currently in the process of buying a car. for my Turo fleet, and this is in large part due to tax reasons, but also due to the fact that we could get a killer deal because of the timing of the purchase. And so if you are someone who is in the market for a car, now is a good time to pull the trigger. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.